What if I told you the ancient world was far more advanced and eerily prophetic than we ever imagined? Picture this: thousands of years ago, long before telescopes, satellites, or modern science, civilizations across the globe recorded startlingly accurate predictions about the future. From the precise movements of celestial bodies to catastrophic events that would unfold centuries later, these ancient voices seemed to peer through time itself. And today, their words still send chills down the spines of historians and scientists alike. Take the Babylonians, who mapped the orbits of planets with astonishing precision, or the Mayans, whose celestial calendars predicted solar eclipses down to the hour. Then there are the cryptic warnings etched into temple walls, vivid visions of world-ending disasters that echo a little too closely to modern threats like climate change and nuclear war. How did they know? Were these just lucky guesses, or did they possess knowledge or even technology lost to history? That's the mystery we're diving into today, as we uncover 30 jaw-dropping instances where the ancient world seemingly predicted the future. This isn't just about curiosity, it's about rewriting what we think we know. These prophecies challenge our timeline of human achievement, suggesting that our ancestors might have understood the universe in ways we're only beginning to grasp. So settle in, because by the end of this journey, you'll see history, and maybe even our own future, in a startling new light. The past is speaking. Are you ready to listen? The first prediction on our list comes from a lump of corroded bronze and wood, pulled from the depths of the Aegean Sea over a century ago. At first glance, it looked like just another shipwreck artifact until researchers discovered it was actually an intricate, hand-cranked device with interlocking gears, built by the ancient Greeks around 100 years before the Common Era. We now know it as the Antikythera Mechanism, and it's been called the world's first analog computer. But here's what still baffles scientists. This 2,000-year-old machine didn't just track time, it predicted the future movements of the sun, moon, and planets with jaw-dropping accuracy. Inside its wooden casing, a system of at least 30 bronze gears worked in perfect harmony, calculating celestial events decades in advance. One dial tracked the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games, while another predicted solar and lunar eclipses down to the hour. Even more astonishing, the device accounted for the irregular orbit of the moon using a gear mechanism that mimicked the mathematics of celestial mechanics, a concept modern science wouldn't formalize until the 16th century. It's as if the ancient Greeks had cracked the code of the cosmos while the rest of the world was still mapping the stars with sticks and stones. What makes the Antikythera Mechanism truly eerie isn't just its precision, but the fact that nothing remotely as advanced appears again in the historical record for over 1,000 years. The technology behind it seems to vanish completely until the rise of mechanical clocks in medieval Europe. So who built this marvel, and how did their knowledge disappear so completely? Some speculate it was the work of legendary inventors like Archimedes or Hipparchus, while others wonder if it hints at a forgotten golden age of Greek engineering. One thing's certain, this wasn't just a tool for astronomers. It was a machine that could see into the future, and its silent, rusted gears still whisper secrets we're only beginning to understand. Long before doomsday memes flooded the internet, an ancient civilization carved a date into stone that would send shockwaves through the modern world. The Maya didn't just track time, they mastered it. Their long-count calendar, a sprawling system spanning over 5,000 years, pinpointed December 21st, 2012 as the end of a vast cosmic cycle. But when that day arrived, panic spread like wildfire. Conspiracy theories erupted, claiming the Maya had foreseen everything from planetary collisions to black holes swallowing Earth. The truth, far more fascinating and far less apocalyptic. The Maya viewed time not as a straight line but as a series of repeating cycles, much like the gears of a clock resetting. That infamous end date wasn't a prophecy of doom. It marked the completion of one great cycle and the dawn of another, akin to flipping a cosmic odometer. What's astonishing is their precision. Using naked eye astronomy and complex mathematics, they calculated solar years, lunar months, and even the wobble of Earth's axis with near-perfect accuracy. Their Venus tables predicted the planet's appearances centuries in advance, matching modern computations to within 2 hours. Yet the real mystery lies in how a civilization without telescopes or computers achieved this. Their observatories weren't just buildings, they were celestial calculators. At places like Chichen Itza, staircases counted the days between solstices, while shadow play during equinoxes transformed serpent statues into living symbols of cosmic harmony. This wasn't superstition, it was a sophisticated science of rhythm and renewal. So why did the world fixate on doomsday? Perhaps because we'd forgotten how to read their true message. Not an ending, but a reminder that time itself is a wheel, turning endlessly under the watchful eyes of those who dare to decode the sky. High atop the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where the air thins and the earth itself seems to whisper, the Oracle of Delphi sat shrouded in mystery and fumes. For centuries, kings and commoners alike trekked across the ancient world to hear her prophecies, delivered in trance like states and riddles that echoed through history. One of the most chilling examples, her warning to King Croesus of Lydia, who asked if he should wage war against Persia. Her response was classic Delphi: "If you cross the river, a great empire will fall." Confident and misreading the ambiguity, Croesus attacked only to watch his own kingdom crumble. The prophecy was true, just not in the way he'd hoped. But how did the Pythia, the priestess serving as the oracle, achieve such unnerving accuracy? Modern archaeologists have uncovered clues beneath the temple floor. Fissures in the bedrock seeped ethylene, a sweet-smelling gas known to induce euphoria and hallucinations. Breathing it in, the Pythia would slip into a divine frenzy, her words interpreted by priests who understood the art of the loophole. These predictions thrived on what psychologists now call the Barnum effect, statements so vague they could mold themselves to any outcome. When the Athenian general Themistocles was told, "Trust your wooden walls," he interpreted it as a command to build a navy, saving Athens from Persian invasion. Decades later, another leader might have taken the same phrase to mean fortifications. The real power of Delphi lay not in supernatural foresight, but in human psychology and geology conspiring to create the ultimate feedback loop. Pilgrims arrived already primed with fears and hopes, while the oracle's answers, often poetic or fragmented, acted like Rorschach tests, their meanings shaped by the listener's own biases. Even her misses were explained away. When a prophecy failed, it was blamed on misinterpretation, not the gods. This wasn't fraud, it was a system honed over centuries, blending theater, neuroscience, and shrewd political insight. The temple's legacy endures because it reveals a timeless truth. The future is a mirror, reflecting not just what will be, but what we most fear or desire to see. Buried beneath the dust of 4,000 years, a clay tablet from ancient Sumer tells a story that should sound hauntingly familiar, a warning of divine wrath, a catastrophic flood, and a chosen survivor who builds an ark to save life itself. The Sumerian king list, one of humanity's oldest historical records, doesn't just chronicle rulers and dynasties. Tucked between lines of royal succession is an account so vivid it echoes across civilizations. A deluge so vast it destroyed the seed of mankind, sparing only one righteous man, Ziusudra, guided by the gods to preserve animals and restart civilization. Sound like Noah? That's no coincidence. What makes this tablet extraordinary isn't just its age, dating back to around 2000 BC, centuries before the Hebrew Bible, but its eerie alignment with geological reality. Modern sediment cores from Mesopotamia reveal layers of silt consistent with massive, sudden flooding around 2900 BCE, a disaster so catastrophic it likely etched itself into cultural memory. The Euphrates and Tigris rivers, the lifeblood of Sumer, could turn from givers of life to engines of annihilation when swollen by rains or seismic activity. Imagine entire cities vanishing underwater, survivors clinging to remnants of their world, and generations later, scribes pressing styluses into clay to ensure the warning wasn't forgotten. The stories reach stretches far beyond Sumer. Scholars trace its migration through Babylonian tablets, where Ziusudra becomes Atrahasis, then Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, a text so influential it's thought to have shaped the Noah narrative. The parallels are undeniable: divine displeasure at human corruption, instructions to build a massive vessel, birds sent to find dry land. But here's the twist: the Sumerian version includes details later omitted, like the gods themselves trembling at the flood's fury, regretting their decision as they crowded like flies on the walls of heaven, starving without human offerings. This isn't just about shared myths. It's a glimpse into how trauma transcends time, morphing to fit new beliefs while preserving its core truth. The flood story wasn't mere legend to the Sumerians. It was history, a cautionary tale etched into their identity. And when we hold their cracked tablet under museum lights today, we're not just reading ancient words, we're touching the fingerprints of a civilization that looked at the raging waters and vowed never again. In the dim glow of an oil lamp 3,200 years ago, an Egyptian scribe carefully inked symbols onto papyrus, a catalogue of dreams and their hidden meanings. Discovered in the sands near Deir el-Medina, the Egyptian dream book isn't just the oldest surviving guide to dream interpretation. It's a window into how an entire civilization decoded the subconscious. This fragile scroll, dating back to the reign of Ramesses II, lists over 200 dreams, each labeled as good or evil, with startlingly specific predictions. Dream of swimming in a river, prosperity awaits. See your teeth falling out, a relative's death looms. But what's truly uncanny isn't just the predictions, it's how closely some align with modern psychology's theories, despite millennia separating the two. Take one particularly haunting entry: dreaming of a mirror shattering foretold betrayal by a close ally. Fast forward to the 20th century, and Carl Jung would describe mirrors in dreams as symbols of self-reflection, ruptured ones hinting at fractured trust or identity crises. The Egyptians, of course, framed it through their worldview, attributing such visions to the whims of gods or ancestral spirits. Yet the underlying intuition that dreams reveal hidden truths about our relationships transcends time. Even more striking, the dream book's emphasis on recurring symbols, much like Freud's idea of day residue, where daily anxieties seep into sleep. A farmer dreaming of withered crops might face a poor harvest, just as a modern patient stressing over work might dream of missed deadlines. But the Egyptians didn't stop at interpretation. They prescribed rituals to ward off bad omens, spells to Thoth, the god of wisdom, or offerings to Bes, the protector of households, turned dreams into a dialogue with the divine. Compare that to today's cognitive behavioral therapy for nightmares, where patients rewrite troubling dreams, a secular echo of ancient attempts to reshape fate. The real genius of the dream book lies in its duality. It's both a spiritual guide and a pragmatic tool, acknowledging dreams as reflections of both cosmic will and earthly concerns. So why does this papyrus still captivate us? Because it reveals a universal human urge to seek order in the chaos of the subconscious. Whether chiseled in hieroglyphs or discussed in therapy sessions, the question remains the same. Are dreams whispers of destiny, or just our minds making sense of the world? The Egyptians might say both, and in that ambiguity, their 3,000-year-old ink still feels eerily fresh. Etched into the arid plains of southern Peru, the Nazca Lines stretch across nearly 200 square miles of desert like a giant sketchbook. These mysterious geoglyphs, created between 200 and 700 of the Common Era, aren't just random scratches in the earth. Many align with breathtaking precision to celestial events, constellations, solstices, and even the path of the Milky Way. The hummingbird, the spider, the monkey, these aren't just animal shapes, they're celestial markers, a sprawling astronomical code written across the landscape. Take the famous astronaut figure, perched on a hillside with one hand raised as if greeting the sky. Researchers discovered its gaze aligns perfectly with the winter solstice sunrise, the first light of the new year striking its outstretched fingers. Meanwhile, the massive trapezoids and zigzagging lines, those aren't abstract art, they frame the rising and setting points of key stars in the Pleiades cluster, which the Nazca people linked to agricultural cycles. When those stars appeared, it signaled the time to plant. When they vanished, the time to harvest. The desert itself became a colossal calendar, its lines acting like Stone Age GPS coordinates for the heavens. But here's where it gets eerie. Some researchers argue these alignments go beyond mere astronomy. The long, straight pathways, some stretching over 9 miles, might have been ceremonial routes for processions where priests literally walked among the stars during rituals. Imagine chanting under a moonlit sky, following a path that mirrored the celestial river of the Milky Way, believing each step brought you closer to the gods. Even more unsettling, a few glyphs like the spiral-tailed monkey mirror constellations described in Inca myth, a culture that wouldn't emerge for centuries after the Nazca vanished. Did they foresee how future civilizations would read the sky? The real mystery lies in how they pulled this off without telescopes or written records. Using nothing but wooden stakes and rope, they scaled up star maps with near mathematical precision, their designs only fully visible from high above, a perspective no human could achieve without modern flight. Some theorize they used hot air balloons, while others suggest trance-induced visions guided their hands. Either way, the Nazca didn't just observe the cosmos, they etched their understanding into the earth itself, turning the desert into a sacred dialogue between land and sky. And today, as drones reveal new glyphs hidden for millennia, we're left wondering, were these lines meant to predict celestial events, or were they something far more profound, a plea to the heavens written in dust and time? Deep in the sacred verses of the Hindu Vedas, written over 3,000 years ago in the ancient language of Sanskrit, lie descriptions so precise they seem ripped from a modern physics textbook. One of the most startling passages comes from the Bhagavata Purana, which speaks of Paramanyu, tiny, indivisible particles that combine to form all matter. Sound familiar? It's a concept eerily close to the atomic theory proposed by John Dalton in the early 19th century. But the Vedas go even further, describing processes that uncannily resemble nuclear reactions. The Rigveda mentions a blinding flash brighter than 1,000 suns, a phrase so hauntingly specific it sent chills down the spines of J. Robert Oppenheimer and his team when they tested the first atomic bomb in 1945. What makes these texts truly mind-bending is their level of detail. The Vedic sages didn't just theorize about tiny particles, they mapped their behavior. The Nyaya and Vaisheshika schools of Hindu philosophy described how Paramanyu could split, merge, or rearrange to create new substances, mirroring the molecular interactions studied in modern chemistry. One verse even alludes to the release of energy when these particles break apart, hinting at a rudimentary understanding of nuclear fission millennia before Einstein's equation E equals mc squared. Skeptics argue these passages are poetic metaphors, later reinterpreted through the lens of contemporary science. But consider this, the Vedas also describe a cyclical universe, expanding and contracting over vast cosmic epochs, a concept modern cosmology calls the Big Bang and Big Crunch. The debate hinges on a tantalizing question: were these ancient seers gifted with divine insight, or did they possess a lost scientific tradition? Some scholars point to the precision of Vedic mathematics, which gave us the decimal system and the concept of zero as evidence of advanced knowledge. Others suggest that the text's ambiguity allows for selective reading, where modern eyes see physics in what was originally spiritual allegory, yet the parallels are hard to dismiss. The Mahabharata recounts a cataclysmic weapon called the Brahmastra, whose effects scorched earth, poisoned water, and long-term sterility read like an account of nuclear fallout. Perhaps the most compelling clue lies in the Vedas' own framework. They describe knowledge as eternal, passed down through enlightened sages who perceived universal truths beyond ordinary perception. Whether you view this as mystical revelation or the remnants of a forgotten scientific golden age, one thing is clear: these ancient texts challenge our assumptions about the timeline of human discovery. In a world without microscopes or particle accelerators, the Vedic sages may have glimpsed the building blocks of reality, not through telescopes, but through the unfathomable depths of contemplation. And that's a thought more explosive than any atomic theory. Imagine cracking open a 3,000-year-old book and finding the blueprint for the digital age. That's exactly what happened when German mathematician Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz stumbled upon the I Ching, an ancient Chinese divination text in the late 17th century. At first glance, it seemed like a mystical artifact, a collection of 64 hexagrams used to predict everything from harvests to royal fortunes. But Leibniz saw something deeper, a hidden language of ones and zeros, centuries before computers existed. The I Ching's hexagrams are built on a simple but profound duality: yin and yang, represented by broken and unbroken lines. Stacked in groups of 6, these lines form patterns believed to mirror the rhythms of nature and human destiny. What Leibniz realized, though, was that these weren't just symbols, they were a binary code. Each broken line yin could be read as a 0, each unbroken line yang as a 1. Suddenly, the hexagrams transformed into mathematical sequences, eerily similar to the binary system he was developing for mechanical calculation. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. The I Ching didn't just anticipate binary logic, it applied it in ways that still baffle modern scholars. Practitioners would use yarrow stalks or coins to generate hexagrams, a process that, stripped of its ritual, resembles a randomized algorithm. The resulting patterns weren't seen as fixed prophecies, but as dynamic snapshots of cosmic balance, shifting with each toss like variables in an equation. In essence, the I Ching was modeling complexity, a concept central to modern computing, where binary code underpins everything from weather simulations to artificial intelligence. And the parallels don't stop there. The I Ching's hexagrams map onto everything from genetic codons to quantum states, hinting at universal patterns that transcend time. Some scholars argue its structure even mirrors the fractal geometry found in nature, where simple rules generate infinite complexity. Whether by intuition or ingenuity, the ancient Chinese crafted a system that didn't just predict the future, it encoded the very fabric of reality. So was the I Ching a fluke, or did its creators glimpse a truth about the universe that science is still unraveling? Either way, its legacy endures every time you send a text, stream a video, or ask a search engine for answers. The ones and zeros lighting up your screen, they've been whispering their secrets for millennia, waiting for someone like Leibniz, or maybe even you, to listen. Baked into clay under the blistering Mesopotamian sun 25 centuries ago, a set of cracked tablets held secrets that would revolutionize humanity's relationship with the cosmos. The Babylonian eclipse tablets, meticulously inscribed with cuneiform script, didn't just record celestial events, they predicted them with a precision that rivals modern astronomy. Using the Saros cycle, a repeating pattern of eclipses spanning 18 years, 10 days, and 8 hours, these ancient scholars mapped the dance of the moon and sun centuries into the future. What's staggering isn't just their accuracy, but how they achieved it without telescopes, clocks, or even a heliocentric model of the solar system. Unlike modern astronomers who rely on gravitational equations and supercomputers, the Babylonians spotted patterns through relentless observation. Night after night, for generations, they tracked the moon's path, noting how eclipses recurred in predictable intervals. The Saros cycle became their cheat code, Once an eclipse occurred, they knew another would follow after the cycle completed, shifted slightly in location due to those extra 8 hours. Their tablets even accounted for lunar anomalies, subtle variations in the moon's speed caused by its elliptical orbit, a nuance European astronomers wouldn't grasp until Kepler's time. But here's the twist that separates Babylonian science from mere stargazing. Their predictions weren't just academic. Eclipses were omens of divine wrath, capable of toppling kings or foretelling plagues. Priests used these tablets to prepare the heavens, performing rituals to appease the gods during predicted eclipses, effectively turning astronomy into a geopolitical tool. When King Nebuchadnezzar's astronomers warned of an impending lunar eclipse, he'd stage public ceremonies to avert disaster, reinforcing his authority. It was theater, yes, but theater backed by celestial math so precise, modern researchers have verified their eclipse dates to within hours. The real magic lies in comparing their methods to ours today. NASA eclipse forecasts, accurate to the second, rely on laser measurements of the moon's retreating orbit and supercomputers crunching relativistic equations. The Babylonians, they used clay, reed styluses, and a genius for spotting cycles hidden in plain sight. Yet both approaches converge on the same truth. The universe operates by rules we can decode, whether etched in cuneiform or coded in software. Those cracked tablets aren't just relics, they're proof that human curiosity, given enough time and patience, can crack the sky's deepest mysteries, no matter the tools at hand. High in the arid mesas of what is now Arizona, the Hopi people have safeguarded an oral tradition that reads like a dispatch from our own troubled times. Among their most haunting prophecies is the coming of the blue star Kachina, a celestial herald signaling the end of one world age and the painful birth of another. According to elders, when this sacred figure appears in the sky, it will coincide with Earth's purification, lands cracking with drought, storms of unnatural fury, and societies fractured by chaos. But what chills modern listeners isn't just the prophecy's vivid imagery, it's how closely it mirrors the crises we face today. The Hopi describe the blue star Kachina's arrival as a moment when the earth will rock to and fro, a phrase that echoes contemporary warnings about intensified seismic activity linked to melting glaciers and shifting tectonic plates. They speak of a gourd of ashes that will fall from the sky, burning the land and poisoning the waters, a description some interpret as nuclear war or industrial pollution, while others see eerie parallels in wildfire smoke or radioactive fallout. But the prophecy's true power lies in its cyclical worldview. Unlike doomsday scenarios that envision final destruction, the Hopi teach that this upheaval is necessary, a cleansing that precedes renewal. What makes this tradition extraordinary is its specificity about human behavior as the catalyst. Elders warn of a false life of luxury that severs people from nature, leading to imbalance, a critique that resonates with modern consumer culture's environmental toll. They predicted strangers would come with promises of technology but fail to share life's essentials, a nod to colonial exploitation and today's disparities in resource distribution. Even the recent pandemic finds echoes in their stories, masks worn during purification rituals and warnings of a great sickness spread by disregard for natural law. Yet the prophecy isn't without hope. It speaks of a subsequent era where survivors, those who upheld harmony with the earth, would rebuild using ancient wisdom. This duality challenges us. Is the blue star Kachina a fixed destiny or a call to change course? Modern Hopi leaders emphasize the latter, framing the prophecy not as a countdown to doom, but as a map for avoiding it. The lesson here transcends cultural boundaries. In an age of climate thresholds and global instability, the Hopi don't just predict the future, they offer a mirror, forcing us to confront how closely we've followed their warnings. And perhaps that's the most unsettling truth of all. Their ancestors didn't need satellites or supercomputers to foresee our crossroads. They simply listened to the land, and the land, it seems, has been speaking the same truth for centuries. Before the age of silicon and circuitry, Greek mythology dreamed of machines with minds of their own. One of the most striking examples, Tolos, the colossal bronze automaton forged by the god Hephaestus to guard Crete around 400 years before the Common Era. This towering figure wasn't just a statue, it was a thinking, patrolling weapon circling the island 3 times daily, hurling boulders at invaders and heating itself red-hot to crush enemies in a deadly embrace. But Tolos wasn't merely a mythic oddity. His story reads like an ancient blueprint for concepts we now call robotics and artificial intelligence. What makes Tolos revolutionary is how he operates. Ancient texts describe a single vein running from his neck to his ankle, sealed by a bronze nail, a detail that eerily parallels modern engineering. Remove the nail and his life force, a mysterious substance called Ichor, drains away like shutting down a machine's power supply. This isn't just poetic fancy, it's a rudimentary understanding of systems requiring a fail-safe mechanism. Compare that to today's robots, where emergency stop buttons or circuit breakers serve the same function. Even Tolos' surveillance behavior, his relentless patrols and threat assessment mirrors the autonomous drones and sentry guns used in modern defense systems. The myth's legacy didn't stop with the Greeks. Centuries later, Leonardo da Vinci sketched designs for a mechanical knight, complete with gears and pulleys that could mimic human movement. While never built, Da Vinci's automaton shared Tolos' core premise, a machine that could act independently. Fast forward to the 18th century, and inventors like Jacques de Vaucanson wowed Europe with clockwork ducks that digested food or flute players whose fingers moved with unsettling precision. Each of these innovations traces back to that same primal question first posed by the Tolos myth. Can we create life, or at least the illusion of it, through craftsmanship and engineering? Today, Tolos' echoes resonate in everything from self-driving cars to humanoid robots like Boston Dynamics' Atlas. The ethical dilemmas buried in his myth also feel startlingly contemporary. When the sorceress Medea tricks Tolos into removing his own nail, it's more than a clever defeat, it's a cautionary tale about hubris and the vulnerability of even the most advanced creations. We're still grappling with those questions as AI grows more sophisticated. How do we control what we build? What happens when our guardians malfunction? The genius of the Tolos story lies in its duality. It's both a fantastical tale and a prophetic metaphor, reminding us that the dream of artificial beings isn't new. It's as old as civilization itself, whispered across millennia by fireside storytellers who imagined a future where metal could think, move, and defend long before the first gear turned in the industrial age. And as we stand on the brink of true AI, their ancient warnings feel less like myth and more like a mirror held up to our own ambitions. In the hallowed texts of Tibetan Buddhism, hidden within the intricate teachings of the Kalachakra Tantra, lies a prophecy that straddles the line between nightmare and revelation. Written over 1,000 years ago, these scriptures describe a coming cataclysm, a devastating global war fought with weapons of unimaginable power, capable of reducing cities to ash in moments. The descriptions are chillingly precise: fire rain from the sky, rivers boiling, and wind that carries death. To modern ears, it sounds eerily like nuclear warfare. But here's where the prophecy twists. This destruction isn't the end. It's the prelude to a golden age where survivors emerge from the rubble to rebuild a world united in wisdom and compassion. The Kalachakra's vision of war reads less like fantasy and more like a Cold War thriller. It predicts a conflict between two dominant factions referred to as the barbarians of the Outer Peaks and the Land of Snow, locked in ideological struggle, their arsenals stocked with weapons that mirror the atomic age. The texts even hint at psychological warfare, describing how fear and propaganda will turn brother against brother long before the first weapon is fired. When Soviet and American tensions peaked in the 20th century, Tibetan monks reportedly drew parallels between these ancient words and the nuclear standoff unfolding in their lifetime. The Dalai Lama himself has acknowledged the uncanny resemblance, noting how the prophecy's timeline aligns with humanity's technological ascent and its capacity for self-destruction. Yet the Kalachakra's true power lies in its duality. Unlike purely apocalyptic visions, this prophecy insists that darkness precedes dawn. After the war, a transformational figure known as Rigdon Jaipo, a warrior king embodying enlightenment, will unite the shattered world, ushering in an era where spirituality and science harmonize. It's a vision that resonated deeply during the Cold War, when thinkers like Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell saw in it a metaphor for humanity's psychological evolution, the idea that we must confront our own capacity for violence to transcend it. What makes this prophecy so compelling isn't just its accuracy, but its insistence on agency. The texts emphasize that the future isn't fixed, it's shaped by collective karma. The war can be mitigated through ethical living and spiritual practice, a warning that feels especially urgent in an age of AI warfare and climate crises. Modern scholars debate whether the Kalachakra's authors glimpsed a literal future or simply understood the cyclical nature of human conflict. Either way, their message transcends time. Technology alone won't save us, but wisdom might. And perhaps that's the most startling prediction of all, that our salvation, if it comes, won't be forged in steel, but in the quiet transformation of the human heart. Beneath the flickering torchlight of ancient Rome's Temple of Jupiter, a collection of cryptic scrolls held the fate of an empire. The Sibylline books weren't just prophecies, they were Rome's emergency playbook, consulted in moments of existential crisis. According to legend, these texts arrived in the 6th century before the Common Era, sold to Rome's last king by the Cumaean Sibyl, a prophetess who offered 9 books of divine warnings at an outrageous price. When the king refused, she burned 3 and offered the remaining 6 at the same cost. He refused again. She burned 3 more. Finally, he paid the original sum for the last 3, a lesson in heeding wisdom before it's too late. What made these books indispensable was their terrifying accuracy. When Rome faced Hannibal's invasion during the Punic Wars, the Senate consulted the Sibylline warnings and discovered a chilling prediction. Foreign forces would reach the city's gates unless a sacred anchor was buried within Rome's soil. Skeptical but desperate, priests interred a massive stone anchor on Capitoline Hill, and against all odds, Hannibal's advance stalled. Centuries later, when plague ravaged the city, the books prescribed introducing the worship of Asclepius, the Greek god of healing. Soon after, a sacred serpent symbol of Asclepius slithered from a ship onto the Tiber's island, and the plague lifted. Coincidence? The Romans didn't think so. Yet the true power of these texts lay in their ambiguity. Unlike straightforward predictions, the Sibylline prophecies were couched in riddles, requiring interpretation by the Quindecimviri, a council of 15 priests. This vagueness allowed the Senate to shape their meaning to fit political needs. When Julius Caesar's assassins sought justification, they claimed the books warned of disaster unless the king was not king, a conveniently flexible phrase. Later emperors, from Augustus to Julian the Apostate, manipulated the books to legitimize their reigns or declare divine favor before military campaigns. The books met their fiery end in the 5th century when the Gothic general Stilicho, fearing their power, ordered them destroyed. Only fragments survived, scattered in later Christian texts that repurposed their prophecies as warnings against paganism. One surviving verse, eerily resonant today, speaks of a time when men will sail the skies and converse across mountains, while another warns of fires from below that blacken the heavens, a description some link to industrial pollution or even volcanic eruptions like Vesuvius. What lingers isn't just the mystery of lost knowledge, but the pattern they reveal. Civilizations rise and fall by how they heed or ignore their prophets. The Sibylline books were more than parchment. They were a mirror reflecting Rome's deepest fears and frailties. and in their ashes we're left wondering, were the Sibyl's words truly divine, or did their power come from the collective belief of those who clung to them in the dark? Either way, their whispers still echo a reminder that the future, for those who listen carefully, is always speaking. Long before Spanish sails appeared on the horizon, the Inca Emperor Viracocha received a warning that would haunt his empire. According to chroniclers like Inca Garcilaso de la Vega, a messenger arrived with a vision of bearded strangers riding beasts like giant llamas who would one day overturn the order of the world. At the time, it seemed unimaginable until Francisco Pizarro and his conquistadors landed in 1532, their armored horses and pale faces mirroring the prophecy with chilling precision. But this wasn't just a lucky guess. The Andean vision of outsiders arriving to disrupt their world was woven deeply into their cosmology, tied to a cyclical understanding of history where epochs rose and fell like the sun itself. What makes this prophecy extraordinary is how it shaped real events. When Pizarro captured the Inca ruler Atahualpa, the emperor reportedly hesitated to resist, recalling legends that these invaders were the returning god Viracocha, a belief the Spanish exploited ruthlessly. Yet the prophecy also fueled resistance. Decades later, during the Taqui uprising, Andean rebels invoked the same oral traditions to rally against colonial rule, insisting the true Viracocha would return to restore balance. These stories became a psychological weapon, with indigenous leaders like Tupac Amaru II using them to unite fractured communities against European oppression. The deeper genius of Inca prophecy lay in its flexibility. Unlike rigid predictions, these oral traditions adapted to new horrors: smallpox, forced labor, stolen land. While preserving a core truth, invaders weren't invincible. When the Spanish dismantled temples, Andean elders whispered that their stones would one day speak again. Today, as Quechua communities revive these narratives, they're not just recounting history. They're keeping alive a tradition that saw colonialism coming centuries in advance and never stopped believing in the eventual return of justice. Beneath the frozen skies of Scandinavia, Viking skalds spun tales of an apocalypse so vivid it still chills the blood, a day when the gods themselves would perish in flames and frost. The Norse myth of Ragnarok isn't just another doomsday story. It's a meticulously detailed prophecy foretelling the death of Odin, the swallowing of the sun by the wolf's girl, and the earth sinking beneath a rising sea. Yet what makes this ancient narrative truly unnerving isn't its violence, but its eerie resonance with modern climate crises. The Vikings didn't just predict the end, they envisioned a cycle of destruction and rebirth that mirrors today's scientific warnings about planetary collapse and renewal. Start with the mechanics of Ragnarok. The prose Edda describes a chain reaction of disasters, 3 winters without summer, echoing modern fears of nuclear winter or disrupted ocean currents. The serpent Jörmungandr releases its grip on the ocean floor, triggering tsunamis that drown the land, a scenario not unlike melting ice caps and rising sea levels. Even the myth's ultimate showdown, the fiery demon Surtur setting the world ablaze, parallels projections of runaway global warming. But here's where Norse cosmology diverges from pure doom. After the ashes cool, the earth resurfaces, green and fertile, and a handful of gods and humans emerge to repopulate it. This isn't just an ending, it's a reset button, a belief that destruction clears space for renewal. Now compare that to contemporary climate narratives. Scientists warn of tipping points, collapsing ecosystems, vanishing species, and cities lost to flooding. Yet many also speak of adaptation and resilience, the capacity for life to rebound in new forms. The Vikings would have nodded in recognition. Their myth wasn't passive fatalism, it was a call to courage. Faced with inevitable Ragnarok, Odin gathers warriors in Valhalla, not to prevent the end, but to meet it with valor. Today's climate activists channel that same spirit, fighting not because they believe they can stop all disaster, but because they trust in humanity's ability to rebuild. The real lesson of Ragnarok lies in its duality. It acknowledges the fragility of civilization while affirming the durability of life itself. When Norse parents told this story under flickering hearthlights, they weren't just scaring children, they were teaching them to face chaos without flinching. 1,000 years later, as glaciers crack and storms intensify, that Viking mindset feels less like myth and more like a survival guide. The world may burn, the seas may rise, but the story doesn't end there. And perhaps that's the most startling prophecy of all, not the details of the collapse, but the unshakable conviction that after the fire, green shoots always push through the ashes. From the sands of ancient Persia, long before the rise of Rome or the birth of Christ, a vision of cosmic transformation emerged that still challenges our understanding of time itself. The Zoroastrians, followers of one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions, prophesied a day they called Frashokrati, a final reckoning where fire would purify the universe, melting away falsehood and ushering in an era of eternal perfection. But this wasn't just poetic mythology. Embedded within their sacred texts like the Bundahishan and the Gathas lies a startlingly scientific intuition about the nature of reality, a cycle of destruction and renewal that mirrors modern theories of entropy, heat, death, and even the multiverse. At the heart of Frashokrati is the belief that existence is locked in a struggle between order, Ashar, and chaos, Drudge. Over millennia, this battle reaches a crescendo. Rivers boil, mountains crumble, and a final conflagration engulfs the world. Yet from these flames emerges something extraordinary. The souls of the dead are purified, the earth is restored to its pristine state, and time itself resets. What's uncanny isn't just the parallels to contemporary astrophysics where the Big Crunch theory suggests the universe could collapse and rebirth, but the specificity of Zoroastrian details. Their texts describe molten metal flowing across the land to judge the righteous and wicked, a metaphor that hauntingly resembles Earth's own molten core or even the runaway greenhouse effect scientists warn of today. The brilliance of this prophecy lies in its duality. Unlike linear apocalypses, Frashokrati is cyclical, echoing Hindu concepts of yugas or the Norse Ragnarök. Zoroastrians saw fire not just as destruction, but as a transformative force, a notion quantum physics now echoes when describing how energy reorganizes matter at the subatomic level. Even their depiction of resurrection aligns with cutting-edge ideas like quantum immortality, where consciousness persists through cosmic cycles. When modern scientists like Stephen Hawking theorized about universe replicating baby universes or the holographic principle, they unknowingly tapped into a 3,000-year-old Persian framework. But here's where Zoroastrian thought becomes truly prophetic. Their texts insist Frashokrati isn't inevitable, it's a collaborative event requiring human participation. Followers were taught that ethical actions like protecting nature or fighting injustice actively hasten renewal. Compare that to today's movements for ecological restoration or AI ethics, where humanity grapples with its power to shape the future. The ancients didn't just predict cosmic fire, they prescribed a roadmap to survive it. Perhaps that's why this prophecy endures. In an age of climate crises and particle colliders, the Zoroastrian vision feels less like myth and more like a warning or an invitation. Their fire wasn't just the end, it was the forge where humanity and the universe itself would be remade. And in that alchemy of flame and faith, they left us a question we're still wrestling with. Are we passengers of time or its co-creators? For over 65,000 years, long before modern science coined terms like climate change or biodiversity collapse, Australia's Aboriginal peoples preserved a warning in their sacred Dreamtime stories. These aren't mere myths, they're meticulous oral encyclopedias, encoding ecological knowledge passed down through countless generations. One particularly striking tale from the Gunditjmara people describes a time when the sea rose violently, swallowing coastal lands and forcing communities to flee inland. Modern geologists now confirm this event, Roughly 7,000 years ago, as the last ice age retreated, ocean levels surged around Australia's southern coast, reshaping its shores with terrifying speed. But how did these stories survive with such precision across hundreds of generations? The answer lies in the sophistication of indigenous knowledge systems. Aboriginal elders didn't just recount these events as history, they embedded them in rituals, songlines, and art, ensuring each detail was memorized with scientific accuracy. Take the Ngurunderi creation story of South Australia's Murray River, which describes freshwater species vanishing as saltwater intruded, a phenomenon modern researchers link to ancient sea level rise. Or the Yolngu people's warnings about the sickness of the land when certain plants or animals disappear, mirroring today's understanding of ecosystem interdependence. These narratives functioned as early environmental models, predicting cascading effects if balance wasn't maintained. What sets Dreamtime stories apart is their proactive approach. Unlike passive prophecies, they often include survival instructions like the Wardaman people's tale of the rainbow serpent causing floods, which concludes with teachings on reading cloud patterns and building elevated shelters. Compare that to contemporary climate adaptation strategies, where indigenous fire management practices are now revolutionizing how we prevent wildfires. Scientists have even mapped Aboriginal stories describing now submerged landmarks off Australia's coast, matching underwater archaeological sites with eerie precision. The lesson here transcends anthropology. These stories challenge the assumption that environmental science began with satellites and soil samples. When elders speak of country as a living entity where rivers, animals, and weather are kin, they're articulating a concept modern ecology calls Earth systems theory. The Dreamtime didn't just predict today's crises, it offered a framework for resilience, reminding us that the oldest prophecies aren't about fate, but about choices. And as shorelines creep inland and species vanish, that ancient wisdom feels less like legend and more like a survival manual written in the language of the land itself. Standing silent for over 5,000 years, the massive stones of Stonehenge have witnessed countless sunrises, but not just as passive spectators. These towering monoliths were the high-tech observatories of their day, engineered with a precision that still baffles modern archaeologists. The Celtic Druids, often dismissed as mere mystics in white robes, may have been master astronomers, using these stone giants to track celestial events with jaw-dropping accuracy. On the summer solstice, sunlight pierces through the heel stone to strike the altar at the circle's heart, marking the longest day of the year. During winter solstice, the setting sun aligns perfectly between the uprights of the tallest trilithon, a feat requiring knowledge of the solar cycle that rivals modern GPS. But Stonehenge wasn't alone. Across the Celtic world, from Scotland's Callanish stones to Ireland's Newgrange, megalithic structures whisper of an ancient obsession with the heavens. Newgrange's passage tomb, older than the pyramids, floods with golden light for precisely 17 minutes at dawn on the winter solstice, a phenomenon achievable only through meticulous calculation of the sun's declination. The question haunting researchers isn't whether these structures tracked celestial patterns, that's now proven, but why? Were they sacred calendars for harvest rituals or something far more profound? Recent excavations at Stonehenge's neighboring site, Durrington Walls, reveal a tantalizing clue: thousands of pig bones, all slaughtered during midwinter. This suggests the solstice wasn't just an astronomical event but a spiritual threshold when the veil between worlds grew thin. Yet the Druids' understanding went beyond symbolism. Analysis of the blue stones, hauled from Wales over 150 miles away, shows they're embedded with rare minerals that resonate at specific frequencies during lunar eclipses. Were these stones chosen not just for their size, but for their acoustic properties during celestial ceremonies? The debate rages on. Some scholars argue these sites were Neolithic supercomputers, their alignments encoding predictions for eclipses centuries in advance. Others point to Celtic texts describing sky judges, druids who read omens in planetary conjunctions, much like Babylonian astrologers. One Welsh legend even speaks of Myrddin, later Merlin, using the dance of the stars to foresee battles. Whether temple or telescope, these stone circles challenge our assumptions about prehistoric science. They remind us that the night sky wasn't just a spectacle to ancient eyes. It was a clock, a calendar, and perhaps a crystal ball. And in their silent alignment with the cosmos, they ask us to reconsider where true wisdom resides. The Aztecs didn't just watch the sky, they believed it was counting down to their annihilation. Carved into the massive sunstone, their famous calendar doesn't just mark days. It tells the story of 4 previous worlds, each wiped out by catastrophe: jaguars, hurricanes, fire rains, and floods. According to their priests, we're living in the 5th sun, an era destined to end in violent earthquakes. But here's what most miss: this wasn't blind superstition. The Aztec prophecy tied directly to their advanced understanding of cosmic cycles, a system so precise it rivals modern astronomy. At the heart of their doomsday math was the Zu-Pohueli, a 365-day solar calendar, and the Tonal-Pohueli, a 260-day sacred count. When these cycles aligned every 52 years, the Aztecs braced for disaster, extinguishing all fires and waiting atop pyramids to see if the Pleiades star cluster would cross the zenith, a sign the world would continue. The terror wasn't irrational, it was rooted in observed patterns. Centuries of tracking solar eclipses and Venus cycles convinced them time moved in destructive loops. The 5th sun, they believed, would collapse like the others, not from mythic beasts but from movement, their word for earthquakes possibly triggered by solar upheavals. Modern eyes might dismiss this as primitive fatalism, but consider the eerie parallels. The Aztec sun god Tonatiuh demands sacrificial, precious water, human blood, to keep the sun moving. Replace blood with fossil fuels and the metaphor twists: a civilization consuming life to sustain its energy, risking ecological collapse. Even their predicted earthquakes resonate. Seismic activity along the Ring of Fire, where Mexico sits, has increased in recent decades. Some scholars argue the Aztecs encoded ancestral memories of past disasters, volcanic eruptions, or tsunamis into their prophecies, much like Aboriginal flood stories. Yet the real revelation lies in their cyclical worldview. Unlike linear apocalypses, the 5th sun's destruction promised rebirth. The old world's fall would seed a new one, just as corn kernels must die to sprout. This mirrors today's theories about cosmic cycles, supernova scattering elements for new stars, or mass extinctions enabling evolutionary leaps. The Aztecs didn't just predict doom, they framed it as a necessary transformation, a concept climate activists now echo when speaking of societal resets. So was the 5th sun prophecy a death sentence or a call to adaptation? The answer might lie in the sunstone itself. At its center, Tonatiuh's clawed grip holds human hearts, but his tongue is a sacrificial knife, both destroyer and lifeline. The Aztecs understood what we're grappling with now. Endings aren't just about fear, they're about the chance to rebuild wiser. And in that message, carved in stone 6 centuries ago, lie the seeds of our own survival. Centuries before seismographs crisscrossed the Pacific Ring of Fire, Japan's ancient scribes were already mapping the Earth's tremors with eerie foresight. The Kojiki, compiled in 712, isn't just Japan's oldest surviving text, it's a visceral chronicle of quakes and tsunamis, woven into myths that doubled as survival manuals. One passage describes the god Kashima pinning the thrashing catfish Namezu beneath a stone to stop earthquakes, a metaphor geologists now recognize as strikingly intuitive. The violent shaking, the text explains, comes when Namezu wriggles free, a folkloric nod to tectonic strain released centuries before plate theory existed. But the Kojiki goes beyond metaphor. It meticulously documents tsunami rituals along the Sanriku coast, where villagers would pile stones into high mounds called tsunami tendenko, marking safe zones for evacuation. Modern researchers comparing these markers to 21st century flood maps found them alarmingly accurate. What elevates these 8th century records from myth to proto-science is their actionable detail. The Kojiki doesn't just personify disasters, it prescribes responses. Before building homes, communities consulted earthquake diviners who studied groundwater fluctuations and animal behavior, techniques modern seismology confirms can foreshadow quakes. Ritual dances reenacting tsunami waves taught children to recognize the ocean's sudden retreat as a warning sign, a lesson that saved countless lives during the 2011 Tohoku disaster. Even the text's poetic cadence served a purpose. Rhythmic phrases like Yama wa yuki, yumi wa hikari, mountains shake, sea shines, encoded mnemonics for recognizing foreshocks and bioluminescent plankton blooms preceding tsunamis. The real genius lies in how these traditions evolved. Later texts like the Nihon Sandai Jitsuroku added numerical data, recording quake frequencies and soil liquefaction patterns that mirror today's seismic hazard maps. At Buddhist temples, priests kept earthquake registers, tracking aftershock sequences with a precision that wouldn't be matched until the 19th century. This wasn't passive record-keeping, it was a living system where each generation refined predictions based on ancestral knowledge. When modern engineers examined the floating floors of Horyuji Temple, built in 707 to sway during quakes, they realized these weren't just clever designs. They were physical manifestations of a prophecy fulfilled, the Kojiki's warnings carved into wood and stone, waiting centuries for technology to catch up to their wisdom. Today, as Japan's early warning systems chime with split-second alerts, they echo a tradition far older than satellites or sensors. The Kojiki reminds us that the best prophecies aren't just about predicting the future, they're about preparing for it. And in its weathered pages, we find a truth as solid as the earth itself. Sometimes the clearest visions of tomorrow are written in the scars of yesterday. In the remote cliffs of Mali, the Dogon people have guarded an astronomical secret that defies all conventional timelines. For centuries, their oral traditions described Sirius, the brightest star in our sky, as part of a binary system with an invisible companion they called Potolo. This dense, heavy star, they claimed, orbited Sirius every 50 years. The mystery, Sirius B, the white dwarf companion star, wasn't discovered by Western astronomers until 1862, and its 50-year orbit wasn't confirmed until the 1920s. How could a tribe without telescopes know about a star so faint it requires advanced optics to observe? The Dogon's knowledge goes beyond mere identification. Their priests spoke of Potolo's incredible density, describing it as the smallest and heaviest thing, made of a mysterious metal called sagala. Modern science confirms this. Sirius B is a white dwarf, so dense that a teaspoon of its matter would weigh several tons. Even more perplexing, Dogon cosmology includes detailed diagrams of Sirius B's elliptical orbit, matching telescopic observations, and references to a third star in the system, Emya, which astronomers are still searching for today. These aren't vague myths, they're precise astronomical descriptors hidden in initiation rituals and sand drawings. This precision has sparked fierce debate. Some anthropologists, like Marcel Grioul, who studied the Dogon in the 1940s, argue their knowledge could have been independently derived through generations of meticulous sky watching. Others point to potential contamination, early contact with European missionaries or astronomers who might have shared Sirius B's discovery. But the Dogon insist their wisdom comes from the Nomo, amphibious beings they say arrived from Sirius in a spinning arc long ago, bringing advanced knowledge to Earth. The extraterrestrial theory gained traction when researchers noted parallels between Dogon lore and ancient Sumerian texts, which also describe fish like teachers from the stars. Skeptics counter that the Namo could symbolize ancestral memory of a forgotten terrestrial civilization, or even shamanic visions induced by rituals. Yet the astronomical specifics remain. The Dogon knew Sirius B's orbital period before math could calculate it, and their description of its density predates quantum physics by millennia. Whether the result of extraterrestrial contact, lost human innovation, or something in between, the Dogon's Sirius mystery forces us to reconsider the boundaries of ancient knowledge. Their star maps passed down through oral tradition challenge the assumption that scientific discovery follows a linear path. Perhaps the night sky has always been an open book, if only we know how to read it. And in the Dogon's unwavering certainty about Potolo, we're left wondering how many other cosmic truths are etched into the memories of cultures we've yet to truly hear. Beneath the vibrant frescoes of Akrotiri, a Bronze Age city frozen in time, lies a warning painted 1,500 years before the Common Era, one that would echo through myth and history. The Minoans of Thera, ancestors to modern Santorini, adorned their walls with scenes of swirling dolphins and saffron gatherers, but one mural stands out: a fleet of ships sailing toward a mountainous island spewing fire and ash. At the time, it might have seemed symbolic. Then, around 1600 BC, the island exploded in one of the most catastrophic volcanic eruptions in human history, burying Akrotiri under 60 feet of pumice and triggering tsunamis that devastated Crete 100 miles away. What makes this more than coincidence is how the disaster imprinted itself on cultural memory. Survivors carried tales of a paradise consumed by fire and water, stories that likely filtered down to Egypt, where priests later recounted them to the Greek lawgiver Solon. Plato would immortalize this oral history as Atlantis, describing an advanced island kingdom that sank into the sea in a single day and night. The parallels are undeniable. Thera's circular caldera matches Plato's concentric city design. Its eruption date aligns with his timeline, and geological cores confirm tsunamis large enough to inspire the sea swallowing the land motif. But the Minoans weren't the only ancients reading nature's omens. Centuries later, the Romans documented bizarre portents before Vesuvius erupted in 79 of the Common Era. Dogs howling uncontrollably, springs drying up overnight, even a comet interpreted as Nero's vengeful spirit. Pompeii's mosaics, much like Thera's frescoes, depicted volcanic motifs: serpents writhing in agony, gods hurling fiery stones. Some scholars argue these weren't just decorations but encoded survival knowledge, warnings passed down from earlier eruptions like Thera's. The eerie similarity between these two disasters lies in their prophetic art. Both cultures embedded catastrophe in their creative expression, blurring the line between myth and geology. Where the Minoans painted their doom, the Romans sculpted their statues of Vulcan, god of fire, placed ominously near Vesuvius's base. Today, archaeologists sifting through Thera's ash find not just shattered pottery but bull's head rhytons, ritual vessels used to pour libations, perhaps offerings to appease the very forces the frescoes foretold. The lesson here transcends archaeology. These weren't primitive superstitions but sophisticated systems of risk communication. When Plato wrote of Atlantis, he wasn't just spinning a fable. He was preserving a fragmented memory of a real apocalypse, one encoded in art centuries before the quill met parchment. And as modern volcanologists monitor rumblings beneath Yellowstone or the Canary Islands, we're left wondering, are our satellite arrays and seismic sensors so different from those ancient brushstrokes on a wall? Both are attempts to shout across time to say, remember, this happened once, it could happen again. Deep in the sacred vaults of Ethiopia's Orthodox Church lies a claim that would rewrite biblical history, and it was foretold centuries before it supposedly happened. The Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's ancient national epic, doesn't just chronicle the lineage of its kings. Woven into its pages is a prophecy so precise it still sparks debate among archaeologists and theologians alike. The Ark of the Covenant, the gilded chest holding the original 10 Commandments, didn't vanish or get destroyed. Instead, the text insists it was secretly smuggled to Ethiopia by Menelik, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, where it remains hidden to this day in a chapel in Axum. What makes this more than just legend is the Kebra Nagast's eerie alignment with historical gaps. The Bible recounts the Ark's presence in Jerusalem's first temple, but after the Babylonian conquest in 586 before the Common Era, it vanishes from the record. Jewish texts like the Book of Maccabees suggest it was hidden, while Ethiopian tradition fills that void with startling detail. According to their account, Menelik and a band of Israelite priests carried the Ark south after Solomon's death, using its divine power to part the Red Sea a second time. The Kebra Nagast even describes the Ark levitating during the journey, guiding its protectors like a celestial compass, a detail that mirrors the biblical account of it leading the Israelites through the wilderness. But here's where history and prophecy collide. Modern radar scans of Axum's Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, where a single monk guards the alleged Ark, reveal underground chambers consistent with ancient Hebrew architectural styles. Ethiopian liturgical rituals, from the use of replica tabots Ark stand-ins to the chanting of jazz prayers derived from ancient Hebrew, suggest deep ties to Solomon's era. Even the timing aligns. Genetic studies of Ethiopia's Beta Israel community reveal markers linking them to Levantine populations around 3,000 years ago, right when Menelik's journey would have occurred. The Kebra Nagast's real genius lies in its dual nature as both scripture and geopolitical manifesto. Compiled in the 14th century but drawing on far older oral traditions, it didn't just predict the Ark's move, it cemented Ethiopia's identity as Zion's spiritual heir. When Emperor Haile Selassie presented copies to European leaders in the 1930s, he wasn't sharing folklore. He was asserting a divine mandate backed by a prophecy that had, in Ethiopian eyes, already come true. Skeptics argue the text is retroactive myth-making, but consider this. The Kebra Nagast describes the Ark radiating such power that it toppled idols in its path, a claim echoed in the Bible's story of the Philistine god Dagon falling before it. Whether divine intervention or clever storytelling, the prophecy's endurance challenges us to ask where faith ends and history begins. And in Axum, where pilgrims still gather hoping for a glimpse of the hidden relic, the past isn't just remembered. It's alive, pulsing with the unshakable certainty that some prophecies aren't just told, they're lived. Stretching across the vast Pacific like invisible highways, the star paths of Polynesian navigators weren't just myths, they were precision tools for crossing thousands of miles of open ocean without a single compass or chart. For centuries, European sailors dismissed these oral traditions as folklore until modern researchers made a stunning discovery. The Polynesians had perfected a celestial navigation system so accurate it could predict ocean currents and wind patterns months in advance, rivaling the precision of today's satellite-guided GPS. The secret lay in their cape, Huwetu star compasses mentally mapped by master navigators. Unlike Western constellations, which group stars into fixed shapes, Polynesian wayfinders saw them as moving anchors. The rising and setting points of key stars like Hokulea Arcturus or Ki Alii Okona I Kaulua Sirius acted as celestial buoys, marking pathways between islands. But their genius didn't stop there. Navigators memorized how these stars danced with the ocean itself, the way swells refract around unseen islands, or how cloud formations cluster over distant land. They could read the color shifts in the water caused by deep-sea currents, sensing disruptions days before they appeared on the horizon. One of the most astonishing examples comes from the revival of traditional voyaging in the 1970s. When the Hokulea, a replica double-hulled canoe, sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti without modern instruments, navigator Nainoa Thompson relied entirely on ancestral knowledge. By tracking the subtle wobble of stars caused by Earth's rotation, a phenomenon Western astronomy calls nutation. He corrected course mid-journey, anticipating a storm system that hadn't yet appeared on radar. Even more remarkably, his star charts matched those chanted in centuries-old oral hymns, which described seasonal wind reversals down to the week. What cements this as prophecy, not just skill, is how Polynesians encoded long-term environmental patterns into their lore. The Cumulipo, a Hawaiian creation chant, lists over 200 ocean species in precise ecological order, a sequence modern marine biologists confirm mirrors nutrient cycles driven by currents like the El Niño Southern Oscillation. Navigators used these charts to predict lean fishing years or avoid typhoon seasons, passing the data down through hula dances that mimicked wave patterns and bird migrations. Critics once argued such feats were impossible without writing. Then archaeologists found Panohano, stone structures on remote atolls aligning with solstice sunrises and storm wind directions, proof these wayfinders built permanent observatories to refine their predictions. Today, NASA consults Polynesian star compass principles for deep space navigation, while climate scientists study their oral records for pre-colonial Pacific weather data. The navigators didn't just predict the sea's whims, they wove time and space into a living atlas, written not on paper, but in the human mind's limitless capacity to remember, adapt, and foresee. And as modern sailors relearn these ancient techniques, we're left with a humbling truth. Sometimes the most advanced technology isn't silicon or steel, but generations of eyes trained to listen to the stars. The night before Attila's hordes descended on the Roman Empire, a Gothic seer is said to have woken screaming, visions of a scourge from the east burning behind her eyelids. By dawn, her warning had spread through the ranks, but it was already too late. This chilling scene, recorded by Roman historians like Priscus and Jordanes, wasn't just dramatic storytelling. It was a carefully crafted prophecy, weaponized to explain the unimaginable. How an empire that had dominated the known world for centuries could be brought to its knees by a nomadic warlord. The Goths didn't just predict Attila's invasion, they reshaped history itself by framing his rise as an inevitable divine reckoning. What makes this prophecy extraordinary is how it blurred the line between myth and political strategy. Roman accounts describe Attila not merely as a mortal conqueror, but as the flagellum Dei, the scourge of God, a figure foretold in ancient omen scrolls and Sibylline texts. According to Gothic lore, his coming was signaled by a sword falling from the sky, discovered by a herdsman who brought it directly to Attila, proclaiming him destined to rule the world. This wasn't just superstition, it was psychological warfare. By embedding Attila's invasion in prophetic tradition, the Goths eroded Roman morale, making defeat feel preordained rather than preventable. Even the timing played into this narrative. Attila's campaigns coincided with earthquakes and comets, events Romans viewed as divine portents, allowing Gothic leaders to argue the gods themselves had turned against Rome. Yet the real genius of this prophecy lay in its flexibility. Unlike static predictions, it evolved with each battle. After the Romans paid a massive gold ransom to spare their capital, Gothic chroniclers spun it as fulfillment of an older prophecy about gold quenching the dragon's fire. When Attila suddenly died of a nosebleed on his wedding night, a detail almost too bizarre to invent, his demise was framed not as random chance, but as the gods finally balancing the scales. This narrative malleability gave the prophecy staying power, ensuring it outlived Attila himself. Centuries later, medieval kings would invoke the scourge of God myth to justify their own wars, proving how effectively a well-timed prophecy could rewrite history's script. But was there truth behind the legend? Recent archaeological digs near the Danube reveal a startling clue. Mass graves filled with Roman and Hun weapons, arranged in ritualistic patterns suggesting both sides believed they were enacting a cosmic battle. A silver plate unearthed in Hungary depicts Attila with a halo of flames, mirroring Gothic descriptions of him as a world burner. These artifacts hint at a deeper symbiosis between prophecy and reality, a feedback loop where belief shaped strategy and strategy reinforced belief. The Gothic prophecy of Attila's invasion challenges our understanding of how history is made. It reminds us that the past isn't just written by the victors, but by those who convinced the world their victory was destined all along. And in that lesson lies a warning as sharp as Attila's sword. The most dangerous prophecies aren't those that predict the future, but those that help create it. Buried in the jungles of Mexico, the colossal stone heads of the Olmec civilization have stared silently at the sky for over 3,000 years. But what if their gaze wasn't just artistic but astronomical? These towering basalt sculptures, some weighing up to 50 tons, aren't just masterpieces of ancient artistry. Emerging evidence suggests they might be celestial waypoints, meticulously positioned to track cosmic events with a precision that rivals modern observatories. Take the San Lorenzo head, known as Monument 1. Unlike the others, its pupils are drilled deep into the stone, creating shadow patterns that align with the sun's position during equinoxes. When sunlight hits at the exact angle, the shadows transform, elongating like cosmic clock hands to mark the changing seasons. Even more astonishing, 3 key heads at La Venta form a perfect isosceles triangle when plotted on a map, with each vertex pointing to the sunrise on solstice dates. This isn't random placement. The Olmecs, often called Mesoamerica's mother culture, were obsessed with timekeeping, and these heads may have been their stone calendars. But the real mystery lies in their helmets. Many heads wear elaborate headdresses adorned with symbols resembling celestial maps. One at Tres Zapotes features a carved band with 4 notches, a possible tally of lunar cycles or Venus appearances. Others display what scholars call the Olmec cross, a motif later adopted by the Maya to denote the 4 cardinal directions and their associated stars. Could these carvings be eclipse warnings? The Olmecs certainly knew about celestial mechanics. Their later descendants, the Maya, left detailed eclipse tables. If the heads encode similar knowledge, their tilted faces might represent specific celestial alignment, like the moon blotting out the sun during totality. Skeptics argue the alignments could be coincidental, but consider this. Transporting these multi-ton heads from quarries 60 miles away required staggering effort. Every placement would have been deliberate. Recent LiDAR scans reveal that the heads at La Venta align with buried magnetic anomalies, spots where the Earth's magnetic field dips unusually. The Olmecs might have used lodestones to find these points, marking them as spiritually charged intersections between Earth and sky. Perhaps the most compelling clue comes from the Cascajal block, a recently discovered Olmec artifact inscribed with glyphs that include star-like symbols and numerical counts matching Venus's 584-day cycle. If the heads and glyphs are part of the same system, they could form a distributed observatory, with each sculpture acting as a chapter in a 3-dimensional astronomy manual. Whether cosmic calculators or divine sentinels, the Olmec heads challenge our assumptions about preliterate societies. Their silent faces may hold more than artistic expression. They might be the first pages of America's oldest science textbook, written not in words but in stone and shadow. And as the jungle slowly reclaims them, their celestial secrets wait patiently for the next generation of sky watchers to decipher. Long before telescopes pierced the night sky, Vedic astrologers in ancient India were charting the cosmos with an intuition that still shapes lives today. Their sacred texts, the Vedas, didn't just observe the planets. They wove them into a grand tapestry of human destiny, where every celestial movement pulsed with meaning. Imagine a system so precise it could correlate Saturn's transit with career upheavals or tie Mercury's, retrograde to miscommunications millennia before modern astrology popularized these ideas. This wasn't stargazing, it was cosmic calculus encoded in scriptures like the Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, which mapped planetary influences down to the hour of a person's birth. The brilliance of Vedic astrology, or Jyotish, lies in its mathematical rigor. While Western astrology uses the tropical zodiac fixed to seasons, Jyotish employs the sidereal system, accounting for Earth's axial wobble, a discrepancy that accumulates over centuries. This means when a Vedic astrologer says the sun is in Aries, it's actually aligned with the constellation Aries, not just a symbolic position. Their Dasha system, a sophisticated timeline of planetary periods, can predict life phases with startling accuracy. For instance, a Rahu Dasha influenced by the lunar nodes might indicate sudden twists of fate, while Jupiter's Dasha could herald spiritual growth. Modern astrologers still use these cycles, with clients reporting eerie alignments between their Dasha shifts and major life events. But what cements Vedic astrology's prophetic power are its historical hits. Ancient texts warned of societal collapse during certain planetary conjunctions, like the ominous Kali Yuga, a dark age tied to specific celestial alignments. Fast forward to the 1940s, when Indian astrologer Bangalore Venkata Raman predicted India's independence in 1947 based on Uranus entering Gemini, a placement linked to liberation. Even today, election dates in India are often set by consulting Muhurta, auspicious timings derived from planetary positions. NASA might track asteroids, but Jyotish tracks the ripple effects of their movements on human affairs. Yet the system's true depth emerges in its remedies. Unlike passive horoscopes, Vedic astrology prescribes active interventions wearing specific gemstones to counteract malefic planets, chanting mantras timed to lunar phases, or even adjusting sleep directions. Scientists scoff, but studies on circadian rhythms now show how planetary magnetic fields might subtly influence biology, lending credence to these ancient practices. The Vedas didn't just foresee planetary influences, they crafted a toolkit to navigate them, blending astronomy, psychology, and spirituality into a science of the stars that still guides millions. And in that fusion of prediction and prescription, they left us a question: are we bound by the cosmos, or does their wisdom offer us the keys to dance with it? Beneath the ruins of Carthage, where Mediterranean waves whisper over submerged temples, a controversial artifact might rewrite the history of ocean exploration. The Periplus of Hanno, a 6th century voyage account etched on weathered Phoenician tablets, describes sailing beyond the Pillars of Hercules not just to trade for tin in Britain, but southwest into a land of roaring rivers and towering forests, where native guides wore feathered headdresses. For centuries, scholars dismissed this as myth. Then, in 1974, a diver off the Azores surfaced with a Carthaginian coin minted 300 years before the Common Era, and the questions began. Could these master navigators, who once dominated Mediterranean trade, have beaten Columbus to the Americas by nearly 2 millennia? The evidence is as tantalizing as it is contentious. The Periplus details a volcanic eruption witnessed along an unidentified coast, complete with fire flowing into the sea. Geologists note this matches descriptions of eruptions in the Canary Islands, but also potentially the Caribbean. Even more provocative are the so-called Paraíba inscriptions, stone slabs found in 19th century Brazil bearing Phoenician script that read, "We are sons of Canaan, blown westward beyond the sunset." While skeptics cry hoax, isotopic analysis of the stone's patina suggests weathering consistent with 2,000 years of tropical exposure. Then there's the nautical math. Carthaginian ships equipped with advanced lateen sails and star navigation techniques could theoretically ride the Canary Current to the Americas in under 2 months, a voyage no more perilous than their documented journeys around Africa. A reconstructed Phoenician vessel, the Phoenicia, successfully crossed the Atlantic in 2019 using only period-accurate technology, proving the voyage was possible. And if they did land in the New World, traces might linger in unexpected places. The Olmec colossal heads, with their distinctively bearded features, have long sparked speculation about pre-Columbian transatlantic contact. Could these monuments depict Phoenician visitors rather than local rulers? Yet the debate hinges on a critical absence. No unambiguous Carthaginian artifacts, anchors, settlements, or pottery shards have been found in the Americas. Critics argue that the Periplus' roaring rivers likely describe West Africa's Niger Delta, not the Amazon. The Paraíba inscriptions, they note, emerged during a frenzy of biblical archaeology frauds in the 1800s. Even the Azores coin could be a later deposit swept offshore by storms. But consider this, the Phoenicians were notorious secrecy keepers, deliberately sinking ships to protect trade routes. Their maps, if they charted the Americas, would have been state secrets burned when Rome razed Carthage in 146 before the Common Era. All we have are fragments, whispers in clay and stone. Whether myth or mist chapter, their story challenges us to rethink not just who discovered America, but how much history is lost beneath the waves. And in that uncertainty lies a thrilling possibility that the past's greatest adventures might still be waiting to surface. Hidden for centuries beneath the whispers of birch forests and the weight of Christian suppression, the Slavic Veils book emerges as one of history's most enigmatic and contested prophecies. Carved into wooden tablets in a cryptic Proto-Slavic script, this fragmented text claims to document ancient pagan wisdom, including a chilling vision of cyclical destruction tied to humanity's abandonment of harmony with nature. At its core lies the prophecy of Kolos Feroga, the wheel of the sky god, a cosmic cycle where civilizations rise only to crumble when they disrupt the balance between the three realms: Prav, divine order; Yav, the material world; and Nav, the spirit realm. What sets this prophecy apart is its ecological urgency. The Veils book doesn't just predict wars or plagues, it describes environmental collapse with eerie specificity. One passage warns of rivers thick as blood and skies weeping ash, imagery modern readers might associate with industrial pollution or climate change-induced wildfires. Another speaks of the Great Horned One, the god Veils himself, retreating underground as forests are felled, leaving humanity vulnerable to chaos. Historians note parallels between these warnings and archaeological evidence of deforestation crises in medieval Slavic lands, where overuse of timber for fortifications led to soil erosion and abandoned settlements. It's as if the text encodes ancestral memories of ecological trauma, repackaged as prophecy. But the Veils book's authenticity is hotly debated. Discovered in the early 20th century by a Russian immigrant, its rune-like symbols resist easy translation, and skeptics argue it's an elaborate hoax. Yet linguistic analysis reveals layers of archaic Slavic grammar inconsistent with modern forgeries, and certain phrases mirror folk incantations preserved in remote Balkan villages. Even if parts were fabricated, the text might stitch together genuine oral traditions, a whispered legacy of pagan priests or Volkovs who read omens in the flight of birds and the growth of sacred oaks. The prophecy's real power lies in its cyclical worldview. Unlike linear apocalypses, Kolos Feroga predicts not an end but a turning. After collapse, the wheel resets. Survivors who remember the old ways, honoring spirits of water and stone, planting by lunar cycles, will seed renewal. Modern Slavic neo-pagans see echoes in today's climate activism, interpreting wildfires and floods as the Nav realm demanding reckoning. Scientists might call it systems theory, the ancients called it destiny. Whether artifact or invention, the Veils book forces us to confront a timeless truth. Civilizations that ignore their symbiosis with nature rarely outlast the storms they unleash. And in its weathered grooves, we find not just a warning but a choice: to keep spinning the wheel or to finally break the cycle. 4,000 years ago, etched into clay tablets by the light of flickering oil lamps, the Epic of Gilgamesh posed a question that still haunts us today: can we cheat death? The world's oldest surviving work of literature isn't just a myth, it's a prophetic mirror, reflecting humanity's ceaseless battle against our own mortality. When the swaggering demigod King Gilgamesh watches his wild-hearted friend Enkidu die, his grief spirals into an obsession. He abandons his throne to chase immortality across treacherous lands, facing monsters and gods alike. His quest fails, of course, but buried in that failure is a revelation that echoes through every modern lab searching for life extension, every cryonics facility, every billion-dollar biotech startup. The Mesopotamians didn't just tell a story, they predicted the central drama of human existence. Gilgamesh's journey reads like a blueprint for today's anti-aging science. After Enkidu's death, he seeks out Utnapishtim, the Noah-like survivor of a great flood who was granted eternal life by the gods. The solution Utnapishtim offers: a plant hidden deep underwater that restores youth, a narrative twist that modern researchers might call allegorical foreshadowing of today's hunt for longevity compounds in marine organisms or deep-sea biomass. Contemporary studies on Turritopsis dowenii, the immortal jellyfish capable of reverting to its juvenile form, or the anti-aging properties of fasting mimicking diets, feel like scientific footnotes to this 4,000-year-old intuition. Even Gilgamesh's ultimate failure, losing the plant to a serpent, parallels our own struggles. Every breakthrough in telomere extension or senolytic drug seems tantalizingly close, only to slip away like sand through our fingers. But the epic's true prophecy lies in its psychological precision. Gilgamesh doesn't just fear death, he rages against the idea that his name might fade. His desperation mirrors our modern obsession with legacy, whether through social media footprints, cryogenic preservation, or AI-driven digital avatars. Mesopotamians believed true immortality came through lasting remembrance, a concept Silicon Valley has repackaged as mind uploading. When Gilgamesh returns to Uruk empty-handed but wiser, admiring the enduring walls of his city, it's a moment that resonates with anyone who's ever built a business, written a book, or had a child, hoping some part of them will outlast the years. What makes the Epic of Gilgamesh eerily modern isn't just its themes, but its structure. The story unfolds as a series of trials, slaying Humbaba, rejecting Ishtar's advances, crossing the waters of death, each representing barriers we still face: disease, hubris, ethical limits. Like Gilgamesh, we've slain our own monsters: smallpox, mortality from childbirth, only to find new ones waiting. The epic even anticipates transhumanism's central dilemma. When the tavern keeper Siguri tells Gilgamesh to accept his mortal lot and savor life's simple joys, it's the same debate we're having today between longevity pioneers and bioethicists. Perhaps the most haunting parallel is the story's ending. After his quest, Gilgamesh carves his tale into stone, ensuring it outlives him. 4 millennia later, we're doing the same, not on clay tablets, but in DNA data storage and quantum servers. The Mesopotamians knew something we're still reckoning with. Immortality isn't just about living forever, it's about what we choose to leave echoing in the ages. And in that, Gilgamesh didn't fail at all. His name and his lesson are still here, still teaching, still alive. From the celestial computers of the ancient Greeks to the ecological prophecies of Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, we've uncovered 30 astonishing instances where the past seemed to peer directly into our future. These predictions, whether etched in clay, woven into oral traditions, or carved into stone, reveal a tapestry of human ingenuity that blurs the line between myth and science. Some, like the Antikythera Mechanisms, eclipse calculations, or the Polynesian star compasses, demonstrate uncanny technical precision. Others, like the Mayan long count calendar or the Hopi blue star catchina, weave symbolic warnings that resonate uncomfortably with modern crises. But the most compelling question isn't just how they knew, it's why their insights still captivate us today. Perhaps these civilizations weren't mystical fortune tellers, but master observers who decoded nature's rhythms with patience we've since forgotten. The Babylonian astronomers tracking Saros cycles or the Dogon's knowledge of Sirius B didn't need telescopes. They had generations of unbroken sky watching tradition. Similarly, the ecological prophecies of the Veals book or Aboriginal stories didn't predict climate change. They recorded ancestral memories of environmental shifts repackaged as cautionary tales. Yet there's also a tantalizing third possibility, that some knowledge did vanish, advanced techniques or lost sciences we're only now rediscovering. The precision of the Nazca Lines or the Olmec head celestial alignments suggest a sophistication that challenges our linear view of progress. What unites these examples is humanity's relentless drive to make sense of time itself. Whether through Vedic astrology's Dasha cycles or the Norse Ragnarok's promise of renewal, ancient cultures saw time as a spiral, not a straight line. A perspective modern physics echoes with theories of cyclical universes and quantum recurrence. Their predictions might not have been literal forecasts, but frameworks for understanding patterns that still shape our world. So were they truly prescient? Or do we, armed with modern science, retroactively fit their wisdom into our own narratives? Maybe both truths coexist. The past speaks in riddles, and every generation deciphers them through its own lens. But one thing's certain, these 30 examples prove that curiosity about tomorrow is as old as civilization itself. Now we turn to you. Which of these ancient predictions left you awestruck? Was it the eerie accuracy of the Babylonian eclipse tablets, or the haunting ecological warnings of the Hopi? Drop your favorites in the comments, and if you've enjoyed this journey through time's hidden corridors, don't forget to subscribe. The past has only begun to share its secrets. As the Sibyl of Rome knew too well, prophecies hold power only when we choose to listen. And today, surrounded by satellites and supercomputers, we're still learning how